everyone, today's episode is about lockpicks. I'm going to be talking about the different types of lockpicks, where to buy them, how to repair them, and how to maintain them if necessary. So first off, we're going to assume it's legal to own lockpicks where you are. Make sure you check those rules for yourself. I can't really advise you on that, but that's your own responsibility, so I'll leave it at that. When it comes to buying new lockpicks, especially if you're a beginner, make sure to check some other sources. Don't just go into Amazon and buy the first cheap Chinese kit you run into. I don't personally have experience with them, but I've seen lots of people come up on different forums and talk about how shitty their picks are and how they're breaking and cracking. A good place to start would be on the Reddit subreddit called Lockpicking. They have a sidebar with a whole shitload of information in it, and there's also some good guides there as to buy your first set, where to buy it, and how much it should cost you. Now really, lockpicks are not that expensive considering a lot of other hobbies that are out there. They're just small pieces of steel which have been milled, so really it's not a difficult hobby to get into when it comes down to simply buying the stuff to get going. You could of course also consider making your own. When I was waiting for my kit to arrive from Canada, I decided to make some of my own. I printed out some templates. Again, you can get them in the Reddit sidebar, or just do a quick Google search, and they seem to work really well, so I'm quite pleased with those, and I've started making different types and different ones since then, and I'll show those a bit later. So my first advice as to buying lockpicks is buy what you can afford, but also buy what you need. And to know what you need, just do a bit of basic research into lockpicking, decide what you're going to be doing with it, and decide what you need. A quick thing to go by was you're going to need a variation of hooks, some fairly shallow, narrow hooks, and some medium hooks. Deep hooks don't get used that often, but can be useful for some situations. Often some form of half diamond or curved half diamond like this is advised. I'll make sure I get some close-up shots for these a bit later. And a small variation of rakes might also be useful for you. In this case I've got a Bogota here and a city rake, as Sparrows calls it, but they're also known as L rakes. And they're basically made to simulate different key bitings, and you'll use them in slightly different manners, but it comes down to raking through the lock in the hope of basically by chance getting the right combination of pin sets. Also, when you buy a kit, make sure it's got some tension wrenches or some tension tools. There are different types. This is a tension wrench, classically known, and this is a flat bar, also known as pry bars. You can get them with or without dog ears, which are the small little pieces here. As you can see, there's like a chip outside. That has to do with the fitting inside the lock. To give an example of using the dog ear, I would use this part. Let's see if we can show it properly here. So using a dog ear, you go into the keyway like this. There's different methods. I personally use this one quite often. But it just makes the entry a little bit thinner and allows for slightly more grip. So when you're looking at getting a set, make sure you've got a basic selection of the tools that are used most frequently. And then once you get a feel for it and start to get more complex locks, you'll find that some tools are more suited than others, and you might need to update your kit with additional materials. The kit that I bought to start with was a Sparrows Spirit Set, which is particularly focused on European style locks, which is something I need over here in Europe, of course. But I found that having a half diamond was also quite useful, so later on I ordered a half diamond. Since then I've made a few of my own picks as well, just to be a little bit more suited for the job at hand. One more thing to bear in mind about lockpicks when you first start selecting and buying them is they are expendable. They have a finite lifespan. Some will wear and bend quicker than others. Ones that you use often, you will likely at some point need to replace. Also, some of the European style lockpicks, or lockpicks made for European locks, since most of those locks have a slightly narrower keyway, or sometimes a much narrower keyway, the steel used for the lockpicks is actually narrower or thinner than on some of the other lockpick styles, in which case they're also more likely to bend. So some things to watch out for when you lockpicks, when you start using them, is do they have cracks in them, breaks, or bends? And out of those three, I'd say bends are probably repairable, but if you start getting cracks and breaks, then I'd advise just to replace them, because you don't want them breaking off inside your lock and possibly ruining your lock. Now I've got an example here of a lockpick that's bent. It's one of my favourite hooks. There was a certain lock I was working on that really wasn't working for me, and I ended up putting way too much pressure on it, and it bent the pick away from the direction that you put pressure on. The problem with doing that is that when you now insert the pick, the hook is not actually touching the last pin. You have to bend it in further, and in doing so you might be actually upsetting some other pins. So I'm going to have to try and fix this one, and I'm going to be using a vise to do that. Now to start this, I'm going to make a reference just so we know exactly what straight is. It's difficult to do it by eye, and especially when you start using force inside a vise, you can easily get distracted and overbend. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a line with pen here, using a ruler. And I've got a good reference on what straight is. Luckily on the Sparrows, the front side of the pick is straight. The rear is not, so I'm not going to be using that for reference. That actually has a step in it. But I can use this here, and you can clearly see, once I've straightened up the thicker part of the body, here, you can see how it bends away from the line. Now what I'm going to be trying to do is use this point here as a fulcrum, and hopefully bend the hook slightly back into place. So I've marked it on the pick here. That's where I want the fulcrum to be when I put it in the vise. Since I'm using a soft wood, I am just going to put it in like this, very simply. It seems a bit brutish, but the soft wood should actually stop it from really breaking or cracking the tip of the pick. Now if this was something really hard, I wouldn't do this because it would damage the tip of the pick. But in this case I think it'll be fine. Now I'm really not putting a lot of force on at all, because bear in mind, when it got bent, I was only using these two fingers and it was inside the lock, so I wasn't using much force then either. I'd rather have a slightly bent pick than a broken off pick at the moment, so I'm just going to see if I can improve it and not even necessarily completely get rid of the bend. Now, again, I'm overbending slightly just to take into account that it will spring back a bit. Seems a little bit better already. I don't know how often you can do this before metal fatigue starts to play a role and it'll eventually just break off, but let's hope this will see us through a few more picks. I'm a little bit nervous. It's already quite a lot better. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Slightly off on the hook, literally just a line's width, but that's definitely good enough for me. So I'm going to leave it at that. Pretty sure that that hook will be working just the way it used to. Let's get rid of this vise for a moment. And I'll show you some of the homemade picks that I made today. I decided to make something of a carrier case that I could wear behind a patch, and it would actually prevent anyone looking at it to see that there was something behind the patch. So what I've done is on one side I've got the side that the patch would stick to, and on the other side I've replicated the back of the patch, so you basically wear it between the clothing and the patch. Now inside of that I've got this little sheet of plastic on both sides, and the two are glued together. So it leaves this little area, this little compartment where you can put some picks. These are the picks that I made. They include a wrench on the back. So I made basically a fairly shallow but common hook with a flat wrench on the back, and I made a Bogota rake, which has actually turned out really nicely, and a flat wrench on the back but with a dog ear. I made them quite small so they would fit in here, but still large enough to actually be quite comfortable to use. Yeah, they're actually not bad. I expected it to be a lot more fiddly to actually use them, but they're pretty decent. Rounded off the edges nicely, gave them a nice polish up with some sandpaper, and tried to do some picking with them, and they seem to work okay. I think I might make one more of these with a slightly deeper hook. We'll see how I get along with this one for now. I had to make the flat tension bar type, because if I was to use something like this it would be too thick. You could put it in here, you could fit it in, but it kind of defies the point. What I wanted was something that could be carried without being bulky or being visible, so the flatter the better. I haven't even put any electrical tape around these like I normally do on my home builds. And the package itself, once it's put behind a patch, it's really invisible. As long as the patch is larger than this, then picks inside, they're very difficult to see from the top or the side, quite well hidden, and they're functional. Let's see if we can pick something with them. This is the Burg Wächter 217/50. I've SPP'd this lock once, 2 days ago, and I haven't been able to do it since, although I must be honest, I haven't spent that much time on it since then either. But what I did find was, once I had made these picks this morning, is that I've made a rake, which is basically a key for this lock. The first time I tried it, it popped open within seconds. And let's see if we get that lucky again. And as you see, they're still quite comfortable to use. They are a lot shorter than a regular pick. The tension bar is about the same size as a normal one. And there we go. That's quite unique actually, because I'm terrible at raking since I haven't practiced it. And this lock is quite difficult for me at the moment. As I said, I've only managed to SPP it once, and haven't raked for a long time and haven't really tried to. And just popping in this Bogota rake this morning popped it open within a few seconds, and it's basically a key for this lock, so I'm quite happy with that. It's an effective set. I hope to try it out on some other locks as well, so I'll probably be carrying these around quite a bit. Thanks for watching. I'll put some links in the description showing the sites and the sidebars that I mentioned with the information to look up for new picks. If you're interested in anything in particular, or you want me to elaborate on something, just send a comment, send me an email, do whatever you like. I'm here, I'm also on Reddit. I'll be happy to learn together with you guys as we progress. Thanks for watching.